In this video, I want to share with you the top 5 most meaningful, most impactful music production tips that I wish I knew 10 years ago that will help you move the needle in no other way. So if you're stoked for that, let's dive in. Hey yo, it's Alex from Mind Music, and as usual with this channel, it's my mission to help musicians produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their inner artist in a deeper way. And today I want to share 5 of my top tips that I wish I knew years and years and years ago that would have saved me so much time, so much headache, so much struggle. And these are not your normal music production tips. I'm not going to tell you how to EQ a kick drum or how to come up with a bass line. These are more so overarching principles that are actually going to help you move the needle forward and achieve your goals with your craft, with your music, and in around your art way faster than anything else. All right, so let's dive straight in. So number 1, I've dubbed it just straight up mindset, because in the craft of music production and art and anything in general, your mindset, your philosophy, your approach, your attitude towards the craft will be infinitely more significant than any form of technical knowledge or talent. And the reason why I say this is that work ethic plus habits will always be more important than technical knowledge and so-called talent, okay? Because the reason for this is that to get to a talented place, to get to a high level of production, pro productions, wherever you want to get to with your music productions, you have to put in the time. There's no way around it. There's no secret shortcut. There's no like button you can press that's just going to make it happen magically. What's going to make it happen is taking consistent action. And that's how you're going to actually discover what you need to focus on learning next. You're going to discover where your obstacles are, where the roadblocks are. And the only way to get that knowledge is by taking action. The only way you're going to get better is by taking action. The only way you're going to get those pro mixes and get better at songwriting and be a better performer, all those things, is by taking action. And a lot of people seem to lean on the idea that some people are just magically talented, right? Or that you need to know it all. You need to know all the technical stuff of mixing. You need to know all the music theory. You need to know how to play every instrument, all this stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that technical stuff and enhancing your knowledge base is not useful. However, it will always pale in comparison to taking action, okay? Because the way that you actually ingrain knowledge, the way you create knowledge, is by applying it, and then it starts to embed itself within you. If you're just learning theoretical knowledge, aptitude knowledge, it does not translate to the actions that you take while producing music. And it took me so long to realize this, and it's easy to hunt for information. It's easy to try to download and try to input more information into your mind. However, that act alone will never get you closer to your goals, right? What's going to get you closer is by taking one piece of information and exercising it so you can actually embed the knowledge, understand it, understand what you don't understand about it, and gain clarity on where to go to next. And this is what typically makes up people who are so-called talented, right? People who have a lot of technical knowledge is because they've put in the work to exercise these principles so they know it like the back of their hand. And on the flip side of that, there's a bunch of super talented people that know it all, that have a knack for remembering things, that still have no results or have no consistent results because they might lean on that too much, or they might only work when they feel inspired, whatever it may be. But the person who shows up consistently and is willing to put in the time and knows that everything is figure outable, everything is learnable, will eventually succeed. It's just inevitable. So another thing I want to mention about mindset is this phrase that was taught to me by one of my mentors, Jordan Valeriot, who owns Hardcore Music Studio. So if ever you wanted to learn how to like make pro mixes for hard rock, metal, crazy music, heavy music, definitely check him out. But he had a phrase that he said that says, action creates clarity. And he taught me this in the lens of, yes, mixing music, producing music, but also in business. And the wisdom behind this little phrase is that the best way to gain clarity on what you need to focus on next, because there's a plethora of things to focus on within music production, within writing music, within running a business, all these things. There's a million things to do, but what actually matters is what you need to do next. And the best way to get that clarity is to be taking action, because through taking action, right, through trying things, seeing how they work, seeing how you feel about them, seeing where you excel, where your strengths are, seeing where your weaknesses are, is going to give you that clarity unlike anything else, okay? You're not going to gain clarity by getting more information, by doing more research. You're going to gain more clarity by taking action. And that's something I wish I knew way earlier in my journey, because sometimes you're guessing on what you need to focus on next, or you have some abstract idea of what you'd like to focus on next. But sometimes what you need to focus on next can only be told to you, can only be shown to you through taking action. So basically, everything hinders. The bottleneck for everything is taking action. And the more you can take action consistently, the easier and easier it's going to be for you to identify what skill to build next, what part of the process you have trouble with, what part of the process you excel with, and start to make a game plan from there. All right, and finally, to wrap up this first point, is this quote from Steven Pressfield, which says, "The act of writing is not hard. It's not hard to write. What's hard is sitting down to write." And this can be applied to any craft, any form of art. So in music production, the act of writing music, coming up with ideas, moving a song along, getting a track done, mixing, all these things aren't really that hard. Like once you're into it, you kind of get into the flow and you make some progress, right? And sometimes you make more progress than others, but either way, you make progress, and it's not rocket science. It's not the hardest thing in the world. But what is the most difficult thing is actually motivating yourself to sit down and produce music, or to sit down and finish that mix. And if you can manage to vanquish that beast, like he would say, and find a way to show up consistently, regardless how motivated you feel, regardless if you feel inspired or not, you just sit down and you start working towards whatever project you're working on. You have a session and you make that consistent. That is the hardest part of any craft, of any music, is that showing up consistently to write, right? As opposed to the writing process itself. So with that, it's going to wrap up our first point. All right, number 2 is maintaining objectivity on your music. And shout out to Mike Monday, who really enlightened me on this aspect of making music. So definitely check him out at Make Music Your Life. He's got a bunch of amazing stuff. He's just an amazing person in general, right? And what he teaches, what he expresses, is that in the modern way that we produce music, we actually end up listening to the same loop, the same track, hundreds, if not thousands of times, over and over and over and over and over, as we try to perfect a little tiny aspect of it, tweak this little thing, tweak this little EQ, add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that. And if you're focused on one single project and you're just constantly listening to it over and over, you lose that objectivity. Think of it this way, like even take your favorite songs that you love and listen to it 100 times in a row, 1,000 times in a row. You're bound to hate it. Like eventually you're just gonna not like the song, because you're gonna find the mistakes, you're gonna find where it's not perfect, it's gonna get boring, it's gonna get repetitious, all of that stuff. But we do this with our own music. So this is a big problem, all right? And the whole idea behind this is to avoid rabbit holes, right? Because it's the rabbit holes of tweaking your snare drum, adjusting things that most people won't even perceive or care about, or won't even impact the listener that much. And it's tricky because you want to pay attention to detail, which is what makes great art. However, you don't want to get overly lost in the detail where you lose your objectivity and you get sucked in where you're listening to the same thing over and over and over and over, and then you lose sight of the impact of the song. You might end up hating the song, right? And like, to define objectivity would be to listen to your song the first time ever. And unfortunately, when we're producing our own music, that's impossible to recapture. You can never listen to your song the first time ever again. So the best way to avoid this is to actually maybe work on multiple projects at the same time and cycle between different phases of the production process, right? So maybe you're writing ideas in one session for a specific song, maybe you're arranging a different song on a different day, then maybe you're focused on mixing something else. And the fact that you're so focused on different tracks and different parts of the process means that you're going to actually maintain some sort of objectivity when you cycle back to working on that same tune again, instead of just cycling over the same thing over and over and over, right? And you want to try and maintain that mind of the first listen, right? As if you're going to show your music to somebody for the first time, what reaction do they have? You want to try and think that way when you're producing music, because ultimately that's what's going to impact or not impact listeners when they first listen to your song. All right. And I can't stress this enough. This is so important in the modern music production age, and the way we approach things is you have to maintain some form of objectivity. Otherwise, you're just going to end up hating your music, thinking it's not good enough, overproducing it, over perfecting it, starting to feel insecure about it because you're listening to it way too much, right? So you want to avoid listening to your songs way too much. Maybe focus in broad strokes at the beginning, and then when it gets more so towards being a finalized project, then you can zoom in on the details, and that wraps up point 2. Right, so let's go to point 3, which is the hierarchy of quality. And I've mentioned this quite a few times on my channel, and I do teach this to my students, but it is so important. So there is a hierarchy of quality when it comes to producing music. And by producing music, I mean writing songs, creating impactful experiences, being an artist, writing your own music, right? And producing it to the final state. That's what I would call music production. And there's a hierarchy of things. There are things that are way more important than others. And if you can get this early in your journey, it's going to save you so much time, and it's going to help you refine the skills that are actually going to move the needle towards you making better music and achieving your goals, impacting listeners, building an audience, a business, etc. So let's talk about this hierarchy. All right, so we have 5 different areas, and let's go from top to bottom. So number 1 is songwriting, okay? So it's your ability to write impactful songs and write parts that go together well, that bring people on a journey, that creates contrast and release, that tells a story, that has meaningful impact on the listener, gets stuck in their head, moves them emotionally, paints a mood, all of that great stuff. The more you can refine this skill, the better you'll be, because everything is subservient to the song, right? If you have the best gear, the best mixing techniques, even the best players, you go outsource, you collaborate with all the best players, all of that will be for nothing if you're working with a subpar song. All right, number 2 after that, after the songwriting, is performance. So this is being able to perform meaningful parts and like really invest that humanness or that soul, that funk, whatever it is in whatever medium you're doing. So if you're playing live music, obviously it would be playing live instruments and capturing good takes, like embodied performances. But if you're making electronic music, it's about having dynamics, having something expressive that's not like robotic, whatever it is, something that really portrays and exhibits emotion, right? And nothing can replace that. You can't program performance. You can't just fake it, right? It has to be something real, and people sense that. When there's something real inside music, that's what people connect with, and that's how people become super fans of whatever it is, because they really connect to the authentic performance and of course the song of that artist. All right, number 3. So after song and performance is then capturing high quality source sounds. Okay, so if you're working within the box, it's basically having sounds that work well together, doing good sound design, finding good samples that work together, and really painting a picture that way. But if you're doing any sort of recording, right, so you want to make sure that you're capturing high quality source audio to the best degree that you can, whether you're recording vocals, you're recording guitar amp, you're recording a drum kit, whatever it is. And you want to also make sure that the audio that you're capturing, you make the choices up front with miking techniques, with whatever other techniques you want to use for capturing the sound. And you want to make sure that it lines up with the sonic vision that you have for the song. Because if you can capture super high quality source audio, it's going to be a breeze to mix. It's going to be a breeze to finalize. However, if you have really bad quality audio, or you're using sounds that don't fit together, or the sound production, the sound design, the samples are not of that great quality, it's going to be very, very hard to mix. And case in point, get your hands on a top tier, like AAA produced artist stem files, whether it's like a band, whether it's even EDM, a producer, and see how powerful and how good everything sounds when there's no processing done. No EQ, no compression, no parallel compression, no mixing tricks. Just right away, it's already 80 to 85% of the way there. And this is what I want to drive home, is that source audio is king. Because if you can take the time up front to get sounds that really just pop together, that fit the vision, and you do all the work up front with miking technique, with performance, with making sure that there's no errors, and you edit up front, it's just going to be so much easier when you get to the editing, the production, the mixing phases towards the end. All right, so next in line after source sounds is then processing techniques. So that's understanding how to use EQ, compressors, saturators, reverb, delay, using automation in your mixes. So this is using a lot of the tricks and the techniques to make that last little 10% and make it pop, to really make it sound professional. And this is important, don't get me wrong. However, it pales in comparison towards getting good source sound, towards getting convincing performances, towards getting great songs, because think about all of the meaningful and impactful, timeless songs that have been written and produced that might not have been the best production ever. It might not be this amazing sounding production, but the song and the performance was there, and it's timeless because of that. Versus how many songs today sound great, like they sound polished, they sound professional, but there's nothing, like there's no emotional impact. It's just missing something, right? And that shows you why that the processing techniques, the mixing stuff, the technical stuff, although it's fun, it's useful, it'll never be as important as songwriting, performance, or getting good quality source sounds. And then number 5 is gear. All right. And especially in today's day and age, having gear, don't be wrong, is fun. It can open up new ways to express yourself. It can be fun to mess around with new sounds and stuff. But gear is the last thing you need to worry about to get professional sounding productions, because to be real, you could just get a DAW and you could use all stock plugins that are in that DAW and just take the time to write great songs, to record good performances, and you can get super top-notch productions. You don't need outboard gear. You don't need fancy plugins. You don't need mastering suites. You don't need any of that stuff. And I know it might be hard to hear if you love collecting gear. And don't be wrong, it's fun to play with gear, and it can help you with your workflow. It can help expand your kind of bag of tricks to make it sound good, but you'll never make a good music because of gear. All right. Gear will never make good music for you. It's only a tool, just like anything else. All right, let's jump to number 4, which is right brain versus left brain thinking within music production. And you can see this as the creative side and maybe the more analytical side, right? All right. It's just two different ways of thinking that we interface with as humans, and overlapping that with music production. All right, and a nice saying that wraps this up nicely is that you're going to be wearing different hats for different tasks. So if you're a modern music producer and you're coming up with the ideas, you're arranging the songs, you're editing everything, the performance, you're recording it, you're mixing it, you're mastering it, you're doing everything, you're wearing a bunch of different hats that before a bunch of different people were tasked with doing these specific tasks. But now, since it's all underneath one kind of hood of being a music producer, especially if you want to be an independent artist that produces themselves, you are doing absolutely everything. And one thing to keep in mind is that as you work in different parts of the production process, you're going to be wearing different hats, and some of them are going to be a lot more analytical, a lot more technical, a lot more step oriented, and other steps are going to be a lot more creative, are going to be a lot more exploratory, experimental, all that good stuff. And especially with art, like when you're creating art and you want to have fun and express yourself, you really have to open up your right brain thinking, right? The creative side, not being so judgmental, not being so formulaic, not thinking that there's a process for everything, and interfacing with that subconscious mind, right? Interfacing with the way that your mind associates things together and how you come up with ideas, right? And you have to allow the space, you have to allow the opportunity for both of these things to come through, but especially the right brain thinking stuff, right? Like coming up with ideas, getting in flow state, finding that inner child, like not being scared to make mistakes, all of that stuff. You have to nurture that, because in today's day and age, our society is largely a left brain dominant culture, right? We really follow order. There's like rules, there's steps. We break things down into pieces and then we assemble all those pieces together. And it's very left brain dominant. And you don't want to be left brain dominant completely if you're going to be an artist, right? You have to balance both the left brain, the process stuff, which is important for like mixing, editing, finding the best ideas for sure. But for creating ideas and like the creative part of mixing, arranging songs, you're going to want to interface with that right brain thinking as well. So again, it's all about finding the balance and finding when to focus on one type of thinking more than the other, and finding that balance within your process. All right, and that leads perfectly into the final tip, which is number 5, which is having a creative workflow, template, approach, system, whatever you want to call it. And some people might have a resistance towards this idea of having a creative system, having a process, because it might rob the music of that ethereal nature, the magical nature, and you can't put it in a box. And I agree with you that music is completely magical, and there's this like untangible thing around it that is super beautiful, and that's probably why we're drawn to it so much, because it's this endlessly amazing thing. However, creative systems is more so for you to be able to interact with your music in many different ways so that you actually move forward and you don't get stuck in these rabbit holes that are such common pitfalls for many artists and producers. All right, so you kind of want to think about a production pipeline or system thinking towards your craft, because the power of this, relating back to point 4, is that you're going to have different mental filters for different parts of the process, and having that in place is invaluable. Because if you think about it, for creativity to be required, there has to be a set of limitations. There has to be a problem, right? If there's no roadblock or obstacle or set of limitations, where does creativity come in? Why would you ever need creativity if there's no problems or obstacles? So it's important to set specific limitations for certain parts of the process to actually invite your creativity to be required for that specific step in the process, right? And that's the nature of a system. A system allows you to approach a process, to approach whatever it is in specific phases, and it's not supposed to be a rigid left brain system that you follow religiously. No. It's these interconnected steps of phases that have different mental focuses, so you can be creative in these different lenses and actually move things forward. Because knowing what to do next at any point with a musical project, whether it's still in the idea generation phase, whether you're arranging a song, whether you're editing a song, whether you're mixing it, mastering it, whatever it is, it's super useful to identify what the next step is for any given musical project or thing that you're working on. And personally, I didn't even really think about a production pipeline or process or approaching things in phases. It just never occurred to me when I was starting out with music production and writing music. But now it's just freed up so much of the worry of not knowing what to do next, of listening to the same thing over and over, by having a production pipeline with a bunch of different musical projects that are different phases, and just approaching it with a specific focus relative to where the project's at. And just that simple approach has helped free up so much cognitive load and allows me to focus on creating music. So a great thing to do with a creative system is to constantly review how the different phases went. So after a specific phase, whatever it is, a session, you take some time to identify what went well, what were the problems, and what are the opportunities that you can then explore next time you come around to that same phase with a different project or the same project. And the power of this is that it's going to identify, it's going to help you find the things that you want to deliberately practice and really refine specific skills that are going to tighten up the nuts and bolts of your creative system and help it flow together. Because, for example, you might be a player and coming up with ideas for you is like a dime a dozen. You could just come up with ideas, whether it's keyboard, guitar, push to a controller, and it's super easy for you to come up with ideas and get all these things going. However, you might struggle with arranging songs. And the way you're going to discover that is by the nature of creating a bunch of ideas, and you'll never arrange a song, or you'll have difficulties with it. But with a system, it's going to really help you identify, oh, maybe you should practice writing songs. Maybe you should study how songs are arranged, some musical devices, and explore that in your process so you can help it go along, because you're not having an issue coming up with ideas, you're having an issue arranging them into a song. So something of that nature. And speaking of creative systems, if you are having trouble discovering your own creative system or getting a workflow together, if you're just getting started and this is feeling completely overwhelming, or if you're having trouble finishing projects, or if you want to get a glimpse inside how I've structured a creative system to help me approach this in phases and get those songs to the finish line, all that good stuff, I've created a system that's 7 simple steps, super easy to follow, that helps you ask the right questions in different phases and help you discover and develop your own approach using this guideline. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can grab a copy of that PDF. It's super handy to have as a printout. in your studio. So if you're interested in grabbing that, you can find it below this video. And that wraps it up for this video. So those were my top 5 music production tips that aren't really tips. They're not really music production technical tips. They're more so overarching high level concepts and principles to explore to really help you fine tune your process and actually focus on the things that will move the needle forward for you. So I hope that was enjoyable. That wraps it up for this video. And let me know, what are your top music production tips? Even if you're just getting started, I'd love to know what you've discovered so far on your journey. And hey, if you've been at this a while, I'd love to learn your top tips for producing music and making the process that much better and easier. And with that, we'll leave you with this video and we'll talk to you later.